And they say, it all starts with you, Andy. You're the bump in the road. If you'll shut the front door and leave those families out on the street, the other regional areas will step up. Well, we just can't. I don't have the heart to do that.
According to the executive director of the Union Rescue Mission, the County of Los Angeles blamed them for the sad homeless situation on Skid Row. Why would the county want them to turn away families and force them out onto the mean streets of Skid Row? Find out next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part one of our two-part interview with the Executive Director of the Union Rescue Mission and the Chief Executive Director of LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. We'll start with the Reverend Andy Bales, who is the Executive Director of the Union Rescue Mission. The Union Rescue Mission provides hot meals and a safe sleeping environment for unfortunate people who have lost everything. In a recent blog on the URM website, Reverend Andy Bales recently wrote about a meeting with the LA County officials where he and his organization were blamed for exacerbating the homeless problem in downtown LA. We shared with him our concern about his statement that LA County is insisting that he close his doors to the helpless families.
We had an interesting meeting with the county. I had asked them to support our Hope Gardens Family Center so we can move more families from downtown LA, Skid Row, out to Hope Gardens.
What is Hope Gardens? We asked him. Rather than explain, we were invited to take our cameras and see for ourselves. The Hope Gardens Family Center is a beautiful sanctuary in Sylmar, where women and children are rescued from the ugliness of LA's Skid Row. Elderly women and young mothers with their children can find peace and safety in a Christian environment where they are provided with food and shelter. Jessica Sampson gave us a very thorough tour of the entire facility. Rather than 3 hots and a flop, the clients at Hope Garden were challenged with all manner of classes for all ages. There are parenting workshops, fitness and well-being classes, financial management seminars, and even computer education courses. There are recreation rooms for teenagers, a playground for younger kids, and even preschool facilities for the smallest youngsters. A van transports the residents to and from the local stores and malls so they can buy their personal items and clothing. Hope Gardens is 70 acres of lush green paradise designed to encourage the dispirited and downtrodden to rebuild their hope and their lives. We asked Reverend Bales to explain how the confrontation with the county occurred.
I was a little bit weary of the meeting because we'd had to take some drastic action trying to collect on money that was owed us from the winter shelters, and so I felt like maybe I would get a lecture, probably more than help.
Remember what he just said. He was anxious about retribution by the county in response to actions by the Union Rescue Mission in an attempt to collect long overdue funds owed to the mission by the county. Fortunately, Reverend Bales had the foresight to bring witnesses.
And I didn't go alone. I took the chairman of our board, David Dow, former CBS News reporter. I took Kitty Davis Walker, who's our PR director, and I took Linda Wood, our CFO. And so I had 3 witnesses there with me. And what happened was that the county spokesperson looked me in the eye and told me that we were the problem with family homelessness in Los Angeles, that as long as our front door was open to families experiencing homelessness, that other people in the city and the county would not step up and provide regional services.
So rather than resolving a past due payment, the county attacked the very premise of the Union Rescue Mission.
And then Michael Arnold, the director, the CEO of LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, I guess said it more eloquently, but a little more bluntly. He said, Andy, you need to shut the front door on the families and leave them on the streets, out in their neighborhoods, so that you'll raise the social consciousness of the people in those neighborhoods so that then they'll step up and provide services to those families.
Was the county attempting to obfuscate their obligation to pay the mission? The message to Reverend Bales was very clear.
So in other words, the logic is, if we shut the front door and leave people out in the street, we'll raise the social consciousness of LA. Well, that kind of tells us to change our mission statement, because our mission statement is that we embrace people experiencing homelessness with the compassion of Christ. And so instead of doing our mission statement, the new mission statement would be, we shut the door on people, especially children, experiencing homelessness, to raise the social consciousness of the city.
This is a shocking statement for a public official to make to a private organization whose sole mission is to provide aid and comfort to the down and out. Why on earth would a county official make a statement like this? Being full disclosure, we took our cameras to LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, where we interviewed the executive director, Michael Arnold. He presented a different point of view when we asked him about Reverend Bales' assertion.
I don't think that's an accurate depiction of the county's position. I think the county's position is that we need to develop the capacity to serve homeless families in their local communities. What happens now is that where we don't have a community that understands that they have homeless within that community, they don't set up any services, they don't have any capacity to shelter someone or a family when they become homeless. So when a family becomes homeless in a community, if there's nothing around to help them, to connect them to resources that can allow them to remain in the community, they migrate out. And when they migrate out, they often come to Skid Row. And I think the county's position is we want to develop the capacity to serve families within those local communities. And when we force them to come to Skid Row, the local communities basically say those aren't our families, they're Los Angeles City's families, so we really don't need to do anything. So our goal is to have the services, the housing, and the resources in those local communities so that families don't have to lose their community just because they lose their home.
So Mr. Arnold is softening Reverend Bales' assertion, but not much.
And with that logic, it would be, well, we might as well close down all of Union Rescue Mission and leave everybody out on the streets of Skid Row, because that will raise the social consciousness of the city of LA, and then everybody will step forward and help.
But who came first, the homeless or the Union Rescue Mission? Obviously, the mission came to downtown Los Angeles to aid the exploding homeless population. So why is the county trying to discourage the efforts of the Union Rescue Mission? Could it be that they don't want to share the money that comes from the federal and state homeless programs with nonprofit and non-governmental agencies? We'll explore this further after we take a short break. We'll be right back.
In the government, there's a phrase used to restrict access to information. That phrase, need to know. At fulldisclosure.net, we want you to have all the information you need to be an informed citizen, unlimited access to all the information we've gathered on our TV show. And if you can't watch us on your local cable station, streaming video of complete shows when you want them. Fulldisclosure.net, when you need to know the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure and our expose of the conflict between the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority and the Union Rescue Mission. Mr. Arnold explained what he thinks should be done to resolve the homeless problem in Los Angeles.
And I think one of our objectives here at LAHSA over the next year and a half, is to really bring some visibility to that so that people understand who are our homeless here in our communities, and how can we as community members step up and begin to help addressing the problem, because it is going to take community involvement. Government can only do so much, nonprofits can only do so much, and our goal is we want people to be able to stay in their local community if they happen to become homeless, receive services, and get back their housing in their local community, so it is less traumatic to them as a family, as an individual, and we don't end up with a concentration of homeless populations like we currently have in Skid Row.
When he says bring some visibility to the homeless situation, does he mean we should force hungry families with children to beg in the suburbs of Brentwood? It sounds like he wants to use those who have lost everything as pawns to frighten or disgust the more affluent into taking action in their communities. Reverend Bales agreed.
That's interesting that you say that, because Chaplain Steve Borgia, the director of all of our programs, that was his exact words, that they were trying to use precious families with children experiencing homelessness as pawns.
But Mr. Arnold was firm in his commitment. Embarrass the local communities by leaving women and children on the street in the communities where they became homeless.
I think the best, at least interim solution for housing is to have temporary housing resources available in the local community, so that, I mean, we certainly don't want anyone left out in the streets. And we do not want families left out in the streets. But having families have to leave their community and come to Skid Row, go to Santa Monica, go to Van Nuys. It takes the responsibility for them as community members out of the community. The ideal solution is we should have temporary housing for families in all of our communities. And knowing how many people are in temporary housing in our communities should influence the local city councils to better understand the extent of homelessness in their community.
What made this attack very peculiar is because the mission does what Mr. Arnold is advocating.
Here's the problem. When we tried to open up Hope Gardens Family Center and move many of our families out of Skid Row, out to a beautiful place, you all were the bump in the road that tried to fight us. And we still won, and we still moved the families, and we have 45 families there and 90 kids. I was just there with them yesterday, and July 4th at a Happy Hat Parade.
Apparently, Hope Gardens hasn't been the only evidence of duplicity with the county.
They've been the bump in the road. We've been the driving force to regionalize services, and we've had to fight and be bold and have courage to win those battles and provide regional services. And I'm not sure what the motive was for this brutal meeting, but we've guaranteed that we will not close our front door on families experiencing homelessness.
Was there other providers there too?
No, it was just us. It was a spokesperson for the county representing the CEO of the county, Bill Fujioka. It was a few of the county supervisors' deputies on homelessness, and it was Michael Arnold, who is the director or the CEO of LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority.
So the consensus from these diverse government entities comes apparently from a higher authority. One can only surmise that would be the County Board of Supervisors, who control the budget. The Union Rescue Mission has a long history of helping the poor and disenfranchised on LA Skid Row.
We've been around for 120 years. 1891, Lyman Stewart, who also founded Biola University and also founded Union Oil. Some people think he founded the oil first and then used his money to do good, but he actually founded Union Rescue Mission first. Biola grew out of Union Rescue Mission, and then he got rich with Union Oil in that order. He started with a gospel wagon going out on the streets of Skid Row, preaching the gospel, rescuing people off the street. And when they were sober, they were on the wagon and telling their story, and when they got drunk again, they fell off the wagon and were no longer telling their powerful story of being turned around. So mostly in history they've served men, and then women began to come to Skid Row and need help, and then in the late 80s, early 90s, families started showing up.
With the housing crisis of 2008, millions of people were forced out of their homes, which had a dramatic effect on the Union Rescue Mission.
October of 2008, I describe it as a tsunami of families, especially two-parent families and families that have never experienced homelessness before, had nowhere to turn, and they poured into Union Rescue Mission. And you know, at our peak, we had about 63 families at the mission, some having to live in tents inside the chapel area. And now we're only down to about 55 families at the mission. So it's still tough times. And as David Dow said at this meeting, this would be a really bad time and bad economy to shut anybody's doors. So we're not going to shut our front door on families coming in.
We asked him to explain what his financial problem was with the county. He explained they had a history of providing shelter during the winter weather.
We've been the biggest winter shelter bed provider for the last 3 years. So if there's 1,600 winter shelter beds provided by the county and the city through LAHSA in all of LA County, for the last 3 years, we've been the provider of 800 of those beds. So we've been a big player, but this year, and then shortly before this meeting, maybe partly the reason why they pounded me so hard at this meeting, we had not been paid $305,000 from the winter shelters that we contracted with the city, county, and LAHSA to carry out last winter that ended March 15th. So we hired the people, we opened the shelters and the armories, we provided the cots, the food, everything, and yet we had not been paid back $305,000. And when we signed up for this, we knew that part of the money came from the county, part from the city, part from LAHSA, some from FEMA, but it was all a package deal. Well, when FEMA didn't pay us and continued not to pay us, and then it became iffy if they're ever going to pay us, now everybody says, well, that wasn't us, that was FEMA, and they've just kind of washed their hands and left us hanging.
Mr. Arnold agreed that the feds are causing a considerable delay in the funding.
Now, part of the funding stream for the Winter Shelter Program comes the Emergency Food and Shelter Board, which is a FEMA-run program, and those programs have to pay the agencies directly. When the federal government is involved, the payment then becomes very, very slow. And what I can say is that the agencies who had FEMA money to support this last year's Winter Shelter Program have not yet received their funding. So to the extent, we're working with the folks at FEMA to see what the slow up is and how to accelerate that. But because it's so hard to cobble together funding for these programs, and we only have control over what we have control over, we manage what we can manage and we try and influence where we can't. But the real issue there is that this is federal FEMA money. It supports the program, and I'm unclear as to why they don't have the money distributed, but it's my understanding that it's a federal level issue that we're working through.
So then the FEMA program is a separate contract from the LAHSA program?
Well, it gets bundled together, and then we agree to pay this portion of their budget, and then the local Food and Shelter Board agree to pay this portion of their budget. We've paid all of our money. They're just waiting for the money that the local board would receive from the federal government. Pays it to the state then distributes it to the local level, so you can see where the bureaucracy tends to slow things down.
Here we are, Union Rescue Mission, trying to carry on our programs, and we've been shorted $305,000, and it puts all of our programs in jeopardy. And we added up the cost, and we figured out in the last 5 years, with all of those winter shelter programs and other programs that we've done for the city, county, LAHSA, we've had to subsidize with our private donor dollars $4.5 million to carry out those programs on behalf of the county. And we figured that next year we're going to spend about $600,000 to $1 million, and we just had to say we can't do it again. You know, my board's looking at me like, how did you ever get us on the hook to do something that we're not going to get paid back now, $305,000.
The funds are cobbled together by LAHSA, according to Mr. Arnold, and then distributed to the Union Rescue Mission and other homeless organizations. If the Union Rescue Mission were to drop out of the program, there would be more money for others, especially the county-run programs. When we come back, we'll explore if this purposeful bureaucratic delay by the county's gatekeepers. We'll be right back.
For the news behind the news, wherever and whenever you want it, go to fulldisclosure.net and get programs on topics affecting you, weekly updates and alerts on hot topics, video streaming of Full Disclosure episodes. It's award-winning, hard-hitting, corruption-fighting news coverage. And it's only available at fulldisclosure.net. Fulldisclosure.net, the news behind the news.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure. Is the county purposefully trying to force the Union Rescue Mission out of LA by holding back contractual payments from the federal government? That is becoming the end result.
We had to make the tough decision a couple weeks ago that we're no longer going to take county, city money through this separate nonprofit that we have. Union Rescue Mission is faith-based, can't receive county money. We set up a separate nonprofit, Imago, to take the county city loss of money to do good. We knew we could do more services by doing winter shelters, and we could help more people.
For some reason, the Catholic Charities can accept city and county funds to operate their shelters, but because of their evangelical approach, the Union Rescue Mission was required to set up a separate nonprofit corporation to administer the same aid.
Yeah, just to accommodate the county so that we could provide services to people that are out on the street during the cold and the rain, because hardly anybody wanted to step up and take those contracts. When we saw nobody else was stepping up, that's why we jumped in and took over half of them in the city. We ran them in Glendale, West LA, Culver City, and we added 200 beds to our downtown facility. And we got paid for 660 beds, but we operated about 820 extra beds because of the need. So it was always, you know, we never were getting paid for the work that we were doing. It was not ever quite enough to keep up with the need.
Mr. Arnold confirmed the policy restricting faith-based organizations from receiving reimbursement from the LA County Housing Services Authority.
All of the programs that we fund require that the program be run as a secular program. So faith-based organizations can apply for and receive funding. However, they cannot tie it to a religious requirement to attend services, to pray, to study the particular religion. They really have to run it as a community-based organization, a secular program.
But the problem is helping more people cost us a lot more money and put the rest of our core Union Rescue Mission in jeopardy, which is to do life transformation. So we've just made the decision, we're going to focus on life transformation of the single men, single women, families at Union Rescue Mission, and our single moms and kids at Hope Gardens and our senior ladies at Hope Gardens, and we're going to just focus on life transformation and move away from the winter shelters. I hope somebody else will carry out those contracts and open up during the cold and the rain, because it gets cold and rainy in Southern California in the winter, but we can't afford to do it if we're not going to get paid.
There are no apparent difficulties with the Catholic secular programs, just the evangelical secular programs. It seemed unreasonable that there's such a stigma against evangelical approach that, according to LA Housing Services Authority, people should be left on the street rather than give a dime to faith-based organizations.
Yes, they would not write the checks to a faith-based organization. We had to have a separate secular organization that did not share the gospel and did not pray or do things with the guests, and so we accommodated them in that regard. But one was to carry out the services, just the services, basic meals, cot, warm place, warm, a roof over their heads. And whereas Union Rescue Mission is much more than that, it's the cots, the meals, counseling, and what we call life transformation through sharing what we believe.
Reverend Bale said that the Union Rescue Mission became the leading organization providing for the winter shelter because the other organizations were not stepping up to fill the tremendous need. We asked him if he knew why they weren't stepping forward.
Yeah, because they were smarter than me. They knew that it was a money-losing, difficult situation. So you go into a neighborhood, you open up a winter shelter for 150 people in an armory that you don't really control because the National Guard runs the place, so you're at their will of how you use it. And then you have neighbors complaining that you are bringing people who are experiencing homelessness into their neighborhood, even though the people experiencing homelessness are in their neighborhood already, living in the alleys and in the streets. And so you're fighting a political battle with the neighbors, and then you're not getting paid what it takes to run it. And so other people were smart enough to say, we don't want to take that on. And our hearts and our love, which we got chastised for the other day, were big enough that we did want to take them on despite the challenges. But it just came down to, at the point when we didn't get paid $305,000 several months late, that we just can't afford, even with our big hearts, we can't afford to do it without putting all of Union Rescue Mission at risk.
We asked him if he felt that he was unjustly ambushed when he met with the LA Housing Services Authority.
Yeah, I thought maybe when they called the meeting, I thought, oh good, maybe they're going to figure out a way for us to be reimbursed, and they're going to ask us to hang in there, and they're going to need us to keep running these winter shelters, because we were open to anything when we went in the meeting. Maybe a little help for the winter shelters, and they'll provide the help we need to keep Hope Gardens going. But that's not what happened at the meeting. The meeting was really, we don't want you, we don't want to deal with you anymore on the winter shelters. We don't want to subsidize anything you're doing, and if you disappeared from the screen, it wouldn't make a blip on the family homelessness screen, even though we currently house 110 families, and we helped 450 families last year, 900 families in the last 2 years. And so as I reflected on what they said to us at that meeting, I thought, you know, well, we've made a difference for the 110 families that are currently living at Union Rescue Mission. I guess that's what I have to focus on. We're making a difference in somebody's life. So yeah, I felt like they didn't want to be, either wanted to punish me or didn't want to be affiliated with us anymore.
Was the reason for this dislike because of an anti-Christian bias on behalf of government officials?
I would say that's accurate, that we always are a little bit the oddball in the room at any of these things that we try to do with the county or the city. It's almost as if our faith is a negative against us. I've even had a banker tell me that if you all would just drop your faith statement, we would give you money, and tried to force me to drop our faith statement. And I said, but our faith statement's the reason why we do what we do, and we can't quit being who we are. So I'm sorry, but we can't drop our faith statement. And I'd say there's some of that same attitude at times from city and county officials.
We want to thank Michael Arnold and Reverend Bales for appearing in this part 1 of our program. We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Do you think that there's an anti-Christian bias apparent in our government officials? Please call our Full Disclosure Town Hall number and let us know what you think. That's 1-800-867-7777. That's 1-800-867-7777. And if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you. Or you can log on to our website at fulldisclosure.net and leave your opinion there. And if you leave your email address, we'll be happy to respond. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us for part 2 of this program, where we will discuss the effectiveness of survival subsidy of government programs. Coming up next on Full Disclosure. Thank you.
To respond to this question or comment on this program, please call 800-867-7777 or visit fulldisclosure.net. Transcripts or DVD copies of this program are also available on our website. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
We have nowhere near enough adequate resources to appropriately address the issue of homelessness. You probably know we have more homeless people in Los Angeles City and County than any other place in the country.
Then why is the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority telling the Union Rescue Mission to take a hike? It doesn't make sense to tell them to shut their doors and stop sheltering the homeless in Los Angeles. Full Disclosure is here to find out